if you're anyway human, I would assume you've thought from time to time, probably looked around or looked within and asked yourself, when does it end, in life? When did the battle stop? When does the pain stop? When is it okay not to hurt anymore? As you look around these days, you see huge amounts of suffering in people. See addictions, particularly in Ireland, you see suicides of the young. You see broken families, destroyed children, hurt lives. And again, you'd be forgiven for wondering, is there an end to it? Or is this kind of level of suffering inbuilt into life itself? And can there be anything done about it? Even with the levels of mental health problems and medications and stuff, people on medication for mental issues, mental health issues, depressions, anxieties, it's huge these days. And so let's for a second assume that suffering and pain is inbuilt into life. Then why haven't we come up with a way of dealing with it? Of learning how to suffer? Of being okay in pain? Of getting through that? Using it in a constructive manner, Hurt and pain and trauma, it destroys, it can kind of tear parts of you down to ashes. But why haven't we been shown how to build with those ashes? How to cement ourselves back together? You look around and people don't really seem to have an answer. Or answers. But maybe they're just looking in the wrong place. Maybe they're not asking the right questions. And maybe we've had these answers all along. It's my belief, for what it's worth, that we do possess these answers. And we've done so for a long, long time. And so, for the purpose of this thing, I'm just going to read a story, and then I'm going to make a few comments about it after, in relation to suffering and overcoming it, renewing yourself, rebuilding yourself through pain. It's an Irish story. It's one of my favourite stories. And let's get into it. Right, so the story I'm going to briefly run over is, as I said a minute ago, is an Irish story. It's ancient. We don't know how old it is. But it's about the two Ididanan when they first came to Ireland. And they met a people already inhabiting the country called the Firbolg. And both sides recognised that the other party would want a share of the island, if not want to completely dominate it. So they both send an emissary to go and speak with the other side. The two Ididanan send Bray or Brez, and the Firbolg send Shreng. Both guys meet up and they speak to each other, and they realise they speak the same language, So essentially there's an offer made. The two Ididanan offer the Firbolg to split the country between them, take half each. So the emissaries go back, they come back again and meet, and they realise that the deal hasn't been made. So they agree to do battle. However, they agree also to delay the battle to give both sides a time to prepare. So the day the battle finally comes, the Firbolg outnumber the two Ididanan, but they agree that both on the battlefield, both sides would field the same numbers, make things even. And as the battle commences, or as the battle continues, the king of the Firbolg is killed. I think his name was Yui. And interestingly, he's said to be the first person to kind of establish a system of law or a system of justice in the country. And also the king of the Tuatha Dé Danann, Nuada, he's challenged by Srain, who cuts Nuada's hand off. But ultimately the Tuatha Dé Danann, they end up winning the battle, and they offer the Firbolg one of the provinces of Ireland, and they take Connacht. So with the battle won, the Tuatha Dé Danann winning, they took over the seat of the High King, known as the Hill of Tara in Ireland in County Meath. They took that over from the Firbolg. However, Nuada, as a result of losing his hand in battle, he had to abdicate the throne, as it was law that no king with a blemish, no perfect king, essentially, could rule. So he had to give up his seat, and who took his place was Brez, who was said to have been incredibly beautiful and handsome. He took over the throne of Nuada, but he began to impose really harsh taxes on his people, and he became a bit of a tyrant. So he wasn't really favoured as a king either. But over time, Nuada got his hand replaced. His hand was replaced by Dian Cecht, or the healer of the Tuatha Dé Danann, or the god of healing. He replaced Nuada's lost arm with a hand made of silver. This hand was subsequently replaced by a flesh and bone hand again. Nuada was given back, or he possessed the ability, or he possessed his own arm again. This is another god that allowed this to happen. So Nuada, his blemish was lifted. He was now unblemished, and so he was fit to retake his throne again as the king of his people. There's more to this story, and there's also a couple of little interesting side stories thrown in the middle of it that I'll come back to. But for the moment now, I'm just going to kind of go back and kind of pull apart the story and see if we can pull any relevance out of it in terms of what I spoke about in the introduction, you know. So why do you use the story? You know, why try and say something through the use of a story instead of just saying A equals A and that be the end of it? Well, there are numerous reasons and benefits to using stories, and particularly myths. One of them is just simply through the use of metaphor and tales that have inside them implicit meanings. It engages the right hemisphere of our brain, which is also the hemisphere that's heavily linked with our emotions, our body, and our sense of self. Another reason is just simply aesthetics. You know, in this kind of, with the internet and stuff like that, we get bombarded with knowledge and facts and experts and scientists say and science says, you know, just raw data that it's not really flavoured or coloured with anything meaningful. And so to engage with a story, much like poetry, it's more beautiful, you know, and it's far older. adding on to the aesthetic or the creative nature of stories, then stories also pull us in. Then they kind of force us to engage with it on an imaginative level and on a creative level, you know. And relaying information through the tool of story, it kind of shifts our position from being just a passive receiver of information, you know, sitting there in front of the news, just taking in those details or that data, whatever. It shifts us from that to a more active participant. You know, not only are we reading the story and the words and the images are coming into us, but we're also meeting the words of the story and the images with our own imagination and creating a picture. Like if two people read a story or hear a story, they'll probably come up with different images or they'll imagine different pictures of the scenes, etc. You know, so it shifts us from being just passive consumers to active imaginative participants, and that can always be healthy. That's the child state, you know. And kids are the most dynamic in terms of growth and in terms of wonder and awe when they're that age, you know. So if we can take a little bit of that and be fascinated with things and be imaginatively hungry again, that's definitely going to serve a purpose in terms of us learning things. In addition to that, reading old stories and myths in particular, they serve to kind of connect us back to our ancestors if the stories are from our own land and from our own people. But also they can plug us into the thinking of vast amounts of generations of other people. Because myths, particularly if they're handed down orally, they're filtered by each successive generation. You know, so what's not really relevant to that generation might be left out, or there might be other things added to it. So over the course of centuries or even millennia, you're left with a pretty crystallized structure around the story of what's been most important and what the dominant thinking and themes are of that people. So not only are you getting the pleasure of reading probably a kind of nice fanciful story on the surface, but underneath that you're also getting plugged into the thinking and the ideas and the imagination and the creativity of a huge successive chain of people that have come before you. And again, you can add to that, or you can take that away, or you can derive your own meaning and plug your own meaning back into that story. So the chain continues. So in a way, because you're getting to see through myth and the characters in those myths what positive or what negative traits are and how people have dealt with them in the stories and probably culturally as well. Myths serve as a sort of eternal yardstick against which man can judge himself, you know, his moral character, his heroic traits, his virtues. And if you think I'm kind of being a bit far-fetched with all this, and that stories don't really mean anything, or they're kind of childlike fairy tales, I would just offer you this. If you look at most of the most successful movies of the last 10-15 years, they've been about heroes. They've been about superheroes, which come from comics, which are just another form of myth. And also probably, I'm sure, the top TV series probably of all time, and if not all time, then certainly now, is Game of Thrones, which is in every single aspect of it based on a little bit of history and steeped heavily in mythology, and a lot of Irish mythology as well. And I'll probably get into that in another video, just how influential Irish mythology has been on Game of Thrones. But that's a story for another day. And I suppose what I'm kind of trying to get at here is the fact that there's value in myths, you know. Well, you can call them fiction, or you can say that they're not factual or whatever, but be that as it may, there's still great value. There's personal value in engaging with stories and engaging in creative pursuits of our own people that have come before us. And that's never to be, the value of that is never to be minimized. And again, as myths are pretty metaphorical, there's like a multitude of meanings, or meanings you can derive from them. But just looking at this story, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it as a developmental story. You know, I'm going to take the Tuatha Dé Danann as one person, you know. So the whole group collectively makes up one person or one individual. And I'm going to look at it that way. How this story correlates with the development of a baby, child, and into adulthood, and the struggles that we all undergo, we all overcome, and sometimes we all buckle under. So that's the way I'm going to look at this. So let's get into it. Right, so at the start of the story, we have the Tuatha Dé Danann coming to Ireland for the first time. As we all come into the world for the first time, you know, as babies, we're born, we enter into this world, and we're part of a family. Hopefully a good one, but we're part of a family nonetheless, you know. And we can look at the Tuatha Dé Danann meeting the Fir Bolg as the individual baby, the individual child meeting its family, and all the kind of conflicts or the nuances that can come with that. You know, perhaps you're not the only child in the family. Perhaps you've older siblings who are looking at this new baby coming into the house and thinking, who is this person? Will they take mommy and daddy away from me now? You know, will I like this baby? You know, so just your entrance alone, as in the story, can trigger or can cause all kinds of potential conflicts, and also potential relationships, you know. And we see when the champions from both sides, Brez and Shreng, meet, that they recognize that they're speaking the same language, you know. So you come into this world, you meet your family, you're of the same house, you know, but also family have been part of society for a bit longer than you have, you know. So I would look at the idea of both sides wanting to kind of dominate the whole land, or one side wanting to dominate the land, the other side just wanting to make a space for itself as the individual against society. You know, we all kind of, to a greater degree or not, have to conform to the standards and the expectations of society. But also society can stand, and families especially, because you're around families most of your time, you know, it's where you get most of your information and your support and your attachments and your view of what the world is. And that can be stifling, you know, because you bring into this world your own sense of self, your own individuality and potential, and the world and the family and society can be stifling to that. So there's almost automatically, from your birth and your introduction to the home, there's conflict on the horizon. It can be no other way. Moving on, when we see that there's no deal made, there's no compromise made, as the individual wants to be fully themselves and fully an individual, and society is having none of that, there is the declaration of battle, but there's also a delay on the battle. You know, so the conflict might not arise immediately, It may lay dormant for a while, but it will spring up. Particularly as the child begins to kind of explore and become a little bit more autonomous. They might stand on family members' toes, not just literally but figuratively as well. So there will inevitably be a conflict. And when the battle does commence, you see the Tuatha Dé Danann, they request a similar number of fighters from both sides take the field, to make things fair. And of course, as individuals, we all just want a sense of justice in the world and the way we're treated and in the expectations that are put upon us, and in our relationships, etc. Because in the story there's far more of the Fir Bolg, and the same with the world and us. There's far more of society than there is of us. So we all seek a fairness and treatment. And interestingly, the king, Yui, I think is the name of him, is killed on the side of the Fir Bolg, and he's said to have been the first person to introduce laws into the country. So what you see is during the battle between the individual and society, the king of the other side, the implementer of the law, or the implementer of the norms and standards, he's killed. He's overcome a little bit. But in doing that, in winning the battle, Nuada, the king, or our own self, he sustains an injury. He loses an arm in combat. And this could symbolise the fact that even though we might have had a minor victory in terms of pitting our will against the norms of society, or against our family members in particular, or our families as a system, we will sustain some sort of damage. There is a loss, We might realise that not all is good in other people, And in the search and in the mission to overcome others, or to overcome oppression in some sense, we might realise that not everyone has our best interest at heart. But nonetheless, the battle is won. And Nuada offers to Strain, or the Fir Bolg, a pick of one of the provinces of Ireland. He doesn't obliterate them completely. He extends an offer to them to take up a part of the country that they'd wish to abide in, or to make their new abode. They subsequently take Connacht, and the Tuatha Dé Danann then take over the hill of Tara, which was where the seat of the High King of Old Ireland was. And interestingly, it could be called Drumcain, which means the beautiful ridge, or Drum na Dheascain, the ridge of the outlook. And through winning this battle, Nuada and his people, or the self, the individual, through overcoming some sort of strife against others, we gain a higher perspective. The new ridge. We get to take our seat on the ridge of the outlook. Our perspective has risen, our consciousness is extended, and we get a new, fresher perspective on things. We have matured a little bit. We've also sustained an injury. Now, it could be said that in life, all things worthwhile come through some sort of struggle. So while Nuada has achieved his place as the High King and on the hill of Tara, and we have gained some higher perspectives and different vantage points through our struggle, or through our interactions or conflicts with others in life. On the flip side of that, we've also sustained some sort of damage. For a child especially, it might be the fact that we realise our parents aren't divine. They aren't perfection incarnate. They can let us down, maybe not consciously, but maybe consciously as well. We could come to realise that our parents aren't good people, or our family members aren't good people, and now we may feel threatened as a result of that. Our innocence might be lost, Our sense of wonder and magic in the world might have been destroyed. We have Nuada lost his arm. We have sustained an injury. And because of this injury or trauma, it can be anything. It can be a plethora of things that you can imagine from your childhood that could cause long-term damage or some kind of hurt. Whatever it is, it's kind of tends to be different for different people, but also what it groups around is the fact that whatever you've experienced has hurt you, and that's the injury you carry forward. So in the story, Nuada, he's not allowed to take his throne, or he loses his throne as a result of his injury, because the Tuatha Dé Danann did not allow a king with a blemish to sit on the throne. The throne being, being master of your own self, being your own king, making your own rules, being your own force in the world, and being your own guider of will, So as a result of trauma, we might lose this. We're no longer governed by our own imagination or our own creative force. We can be governed by hurt and pain. And this can kind of colour the lens of how we see the world, and thus influence our interactions with it. So in the story, as Nuada has to abdicate his throne, Brez takes his place. Now Brez is said to be extremely beautiful, very alluring and captivating to look at. And what this could mean is, as a result of sustaining some sort of injury or some sort of trauma or emotional hurt, we might put our real self and hide it in the background and put forward a pseudo self or a face that interacts with the world that might stop us from being injured in the future. We might have shown to our family or to teachers or to schoolmates, whatever, a glimpse of our true self, and it may have been shunned or laughed at. So we put that on the back seat and we put up a bit of a front towards the world, So the beauty aspect might be that showing this side of ourselves now to the world becomes a more appealing idea than showing our true nature, because showing our true nature might have resulted in hurt before. So now we show the consequences of the trauma. That becomes our front. We become a little bit hardened, as is seen in the story where Brez becomes a tyrant. He starts extorting taxes from the people and suppressing his own people. So our reaction to trauma might be that a darker aspect of ourselves comes to the fore, and it kind of dictates our interactions, as I said. So instead, you see it in kids, instead of like 5 or 6 year olds just going up to the next kid saying, "Do you want to play?" We tend to lose that. We might tend to look at others with a bit of suspicion, as they might have the potential to hurt us or to say no to us, So like the idea of a 10-year-old or 11 or 12-year-old or 20-year-old going up to another person and saying, "Would you like to play?" That's considered strange now, So somewhere along the line, that natural seeking of connection with others gets hurt or injured. So we put that away and we put up our Brez to the world, We put up the side of the world or the side of us that society smiles on and accepts, And meanwhile, that we also suffer the consequences of that by not showing our true nature to the world, or maybe having a sense of shame around who we are. That can kind of consolidate our sense of self-worth, And the sad thing about this is that a lot of people can fall in love with that persona they present to the world because it gets congratulated, it gets accepted, it's maybe even wanted, it's invited to parties. People share jokes with that side of us. They don't laugh at it. Everything kind of runs smoothly along, So a lot of people can live their lives just with that mask on and bury their true nature, bury that innocence, bury that childlike quality they brought into the world. But Nuada didn't. While he sustained the loss of his arm, the god of healing, Dian Kecht, I'm probably killing them Irish pronunciations. If I am, then please give me the correct ones. But the god of healing, he fashions for Nuada a new arm, an arm of silver, which is incredibly interesting, because silver in the mystery traditions or the occult traditions, I suppose, or the magical traditions, is associated with the moon. It's the metal of the moon. And the moon, due to its reflective nature and only ever showing one side of itself to us, is synonymous with the unconscious, or aspects of ourselves that we don't show to the world, and we might not even show to ourselves, more importantly. So where are we? Nuada has been in battle. He sustained an injury. He got that injury fixed, but it's made of silver. So in our world, we come into conflict with others, maybe family, again, classmates, teachers, anybody, pick anyone, whatever your story is, or whatever your history is. And an arm we lose our throne as a result of that. We lose our ability to work from ourselves. We might sacrifice ourselves to society then and become just a chimera of a person, a ghost that just plugs in with others and is happy to follow along. Or we might seek more of that. We might have our arm fashioned out of silver, and we might take that on as part of our body. So what you're doing there is you're taking that trauma and you're carrying it with you. It becomes a part of you. As Nuada's silver arm eventually gets brought into being a human arm again. What that symbolises then is, while we have an unconscious hurt in ourselves, pain that we probably don't want to go through or we've long forgotten, the way of overcoming that is by making it part of ourselves, by looking into ourselves and realising not just how or why we were hurt, but that we were hurt. That's the start. Never mind the why or the wanting it to be over or why do I have to feel this way. Just accept the fact that maybe I was hurt. What is that like? What is it like to feel that? Bring that into ourselves, and it doesn't have to be gone through with other people. It doesn't necessarily have to be spoken about with others, although that can help given the right people. Just accepting the fact that I feel pain. That's owning the silver hand, and it's fleshing it out again. It's becoming a part of you again. And as a result of that, you get to take back your throne, by owning your own pain, your own suffering, your own history. Your pain is your history. It's your story. And if you neglect that or shy away from that, you're abandoning your own history, your own story, what has led you to be who you are now. You're essentially abandoning yourself to yourself. And also, implicit in this process is the act of dying. By looking at our pain, looking at our suffering, looking at our history. There's an element of death involved in that. An old way of seeing the world and viewing ourselves and viewing family members or society. That might have to be lost for a newer, fresher aspect of ourselves to be born. And I will get into that when the story continues on in the next one. So, cheers.